Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Magic gameplay. This time around we are on the Oasis of False Hope, playing as the forces of the Greenskins against the forces of the Dreadfleet. And for this build, well, as you can see, we's gobos. 1570, I outnumber my opponent by a ratio over 3 to 1, and it's because we've gone with a full-on Vanguard Goblin build. Now, when I say full-on Vanguard, there are actually a few non-Vanguard options here, and we will discuss those in a second. But obviously with Gobos, you want to go as wide as possible, you want to hit as hard as possible, as quickly as possible, and you really want to be overwhelming your opponent from all angles, because in a straight-up honest fight, well, that makes you use a dumb git, and you're going to lose. So, for my lord, bringing Goblin Great Shaman, the best way to go if you're looking to go wide and relatively safe. Now, it might not seem very safe when you look at that pitiful 25 armor and 3k HP, and this is on a mount. That's less than a lot of foot lords, and he's mounted with that. But he does have a lot of benefits. First of all, he's very mobile. Now, normally I think it's 92 speed, but with evasion, he's up to 98 mobility, which is pretty nuts. It means he basically can't be caught in melee unless you're really bad and let him get snared somewhere. He also provides magical support. So rather than having to be in the thick of things, you can sit tight around 200, 250 meters away from the main battle and just cast spells and support. Now, obviously, you're not going to get more than one wall off, but honestly, with goblins, you're not really looking to get too many walls off anyway, so who cares? We do have, of course, Arcane Conduit, and then for spells, Itchy Nuisance to keep our goblins alive better, Vindictive Glare to snipe big single models, and then Sneaky Stabbing, of course, for buff to Gobos, and of course, Sneaky Stealing, because you do want to debuff that enemy Winds of Magic when you're playing against Vampire Coast. Now, for my front line, it is a whole bunch of Night Goblins, vanilla variant. Fanatics, they're not a bad ability, actually, but they're just way too micro-intensive. Alongside them, we do have the Warlord's Boys here. There are 4 units of Night Goblins, chevron up a good bit. The Warlord's Boys, who are the Regiment of Renown with Armor Sundering and Immune Psychology. And then the Regiment of Renown Fanatics, who are Unbreakable, the AP Gloonies, so they're pretty cool. On the far flanks, we do have 2 units of Nasty Skulkers, and then 2 units of Squig Hoppers. And these guys are, of course, there to complete the envelopment, and they are backed by the Mogrim's Mangy Marauders here. Another mobile and AP unit, so they'll be able to apply a lot of missile pressure. And then we do have 4 units of Night Goblin Archers with the Rusty Arrows in the center, so a huge Goblin firing line looking to overwhelm whatever we face with sheer Daka. And finally, in the very back, 3 units of Doomdiver Catapults, which might seem like an odd choice given the preponderance of Vampire Coast artillery and their superiority. But Doomdivers can actually whittle down. Necrofex Colossi and these blobs of depth guard and shooting, they can actually whittle them down over time, and they can outrange them, so it's pretty cool. And I actually do like using Doomdivers. They are very precise, and against those mid to low armor units, they're very, very potent. For my opponent, though, he went the opposite route. He went full elite, basically. For his lord, he did bring Count Noctilus, who is mounted on a Necrofex. He does have, of course, the Invocation of the Neck, as well as Drowned Dead. No Captain Ross Moondial, so he's going to be struggling with summons, and that is, in my opinion, a big mistake. You always want that. Not necessarily always want Wraithstorm, but definitely want Ross Moondial. And otherwise, though, he's going to be a potent force. He can do a lot of range damage, and, of course, causes fear and terror, which goblins are averse to. Whereas frontline, my opponent has some zombie pirate deckhands with halberds who are protecting 3 units of deck gunners, and these guys, of course, do outrange all of my shooting except the Doomdiver Catapults, and they'll be able to plow through. They can punch through the infantry in the front here. They can actually pierce models, so they will be doing quite a lot of work potentially. But if we can overwhelm them with fire, they're not going to do too much. And in the back, Carronade for counter battery fire, as well as to hopefully snipe some models, perhaps looking to snipe my Goblin Great Shaman. A few Depth Guard who will dice through these poor squishy goblins very, very efficiently. A single unit of Rotting Prometheans also will hold up very nicely against Gobos. Some Depth Guard with Pole Arms, an interesting pick, perhaps in case of Black Orcs. And then finally some Moongrals. So some very, very elite forces here. I think you want to go a little more balanced than this usually, but nonetheless, we will see how they perform. You can see the deck hunters there unloading on the goblins, but they are goblins, so who cares if we lose a few of them? And we are closing the gap very quickly. Wah is going off as the lines start closing, perhaps a little prematurely, but honestly, with the goblins, it just doesn't matter. We're not really looking to get too much out of that Wah anyway. And in the meantime, the Doomdivers here punching into Noctilus, and you can see how much they're doing. Within the first 2 volleys, Noctilus is already, and obviously this is 2,700 gold worth of Doomdivers, but he's already down over 1,000 HP. So that is them really paying their dues, slamming into him, and hurting him bad. In the meantime, over here, the poor deck gunners do get caught up by the Goblin firing line, which is overwhelming them. And over here, the AP Loonies tying down the depth guard while they get armor sundered and shot to death by this Goblin focus fire. Unfortunately, the Moongulls here are going to be able to overwhelm the Goblins on the flank, though not before sustaining significant damage. And this is one of the problems with Moongulls. They're very, very soft and squishy. Only 24 melee defense and 40 armor means that even with hunger, if they're unsupported, they will get slaughtered by infantry. And it's actually pretty brutal. Now the Nasty Skulkers, though, coming in to save the day. And in the meantime, the Squig's collapsing on the back line, jumping on the Carronade, jumping on the remaining deck gunners, most of whom have already been shot to death, except this one unit over here. And now my opponent here committing Noctilus to the front line, which is, in my opinion, a big mistake because it means he's getting exposed to this crossfire. Now, obviously, over here, a summon is going to pressure my backline, but poor Nocti boy here just getting swarmed by that goblin fire. The constant barrage coming in. I haven't even used the Vindictive Glare. I actually wasn't even really using spells this game, but we do a sneaky stab in here to bog down these Morning Galls. You can see this nasty Skulkers here really slaughtering them, using a smoke bomb to keep them in place and protect the backline, which at this point is basically finished murderizing Noctilus. Elsewhere in the meantime, the Night Goblin Squig Hoppers running amok, diving in on the Depth Guard, who they will be able to mince through pretty effectively. They are not a bad anti-infantry unit at all, and I would consider them definitely better than Boar Boys if you're looking for a low-tier or mid-tier cav to use with Greenskins. And here Noctilus finally does go down, slaughtered by the peppering fire of 100 Goblin Archers, or actually probably more like a couple hundred Goblin Archers. Elsewhere in the meantime, we do use a smoke bomb to prevent these, or hopefully prevent these rotting Prometheans from escaping, but it seemed to have missed. But it doesn't really matter. At this stage of the game, it is all over. Even my Goblin Great Shaman is diving into the fray here to start doing some damage to the Perspired Deckhands. He's actually getting armor sundered by friendly fire. Obviously, he's not the most amazing in combat, and when I say not the most amazing, I mean he's pretty garbage, but hey, it doesn't really matter. At this point, just clean up an Isle 9, and that is going to be a game. There isn't much more to be said. Zombie Pirate Deckhands here getting mopped up. This is the drop that fell off the Count Noctilus. And that is going to be a game. So, a fun, very high speed match, which is why I'm going to be doing a second one right after this. And it seems to have lagged out a little bit there. That's really, really weird. But, that was really, really odd. But a fun, fast-paced match, and my opponent's build here, not necessarily the most competitive. I think if you're looking to go against Greenskins, you really do need to have a very wide line of defenses. Either you have to have a lot of summons, or you have to have a lot of defenses. And I think my opponent's army build was just way too narrow here. I think a lot of chaff backed by some DACA is probably the way to go. But if you were going to go the Depth Guard route, you do need to, I think, cut back on some of these Deck Gunners. You do need to cut some of these corners. But I just don't think the Depth Guard is really that good. If your opponent goes with Black Orcs and Savage Orc Big Guns and gets a wall off, you're going to get slaughtered. You guys probably seen one of my recent videos where I pulled off the win with Noctilus, but in the melee fight, the Depth Guard just couldn't hold against Black Orcs, and it was some brutal stuff. So, if you're looking for an infantry to hold that's more elite, Sirens are actually not bad. They've got decent melee defense and that melee attack debuff, which can make Greenskins a lot weaker. But I really wouldn't look to Depth Guard to provide you with that staying power and ability to deal. Now, obviously against Chaff, they'll do great, and they did okay, 85, 41, 49 kills here, but it really just wasn't enough, and they were way too expensive for what they were providing. As for this build, if you're looking for a Gabo build that counters Vampire Ghost, okay. This is actually not bad. I don't think it's a terrible way to go. You've got the Vanguard, so you're immediately up in their face. You get to avoid all that artillery pressure. You do have those Doom Divers to apply a constant stream of pressure. Now, over the course of a longer game, if your opponent bunkers down and plays perhaps a little safer, over a long game, the Doom Divers can do a lot of damage to someone like Noctilus or a Necrofex Colossus if your opponent goes with the Gallows Giant or something. And they can really augment this main firing line. And they're a very solid, safe damage dealer. And I think a lot of people underestimate the power there, but especially if you're able to shut down enemy artillery, if your opponent has Carronades, for example, and you get on top of them with Squig Hoppers, well then, there's nothing to really shut down the Doom Divers. They can just keep firing and win. So, yeah, they're pretty potent. But yeah, well played to my opponent here, Spirit Moon. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we're going to be off to something, I guess, a little slower. So, this time around, we are on the Reeking Mire, and we're playing as Brettonia against, once again, the Vampire Coast. And one of the builds here that I've actually brought is actually something I nicked off. I forget who the player was, but a player that I played against way back when the patch dropped for II with the Vampire Coast. And he really caught me off guard. He brought a very wide Brettonian build against my Vampire Coast build. And he had Battle Pilgrims and he had Peasant Bows. It wasn't entirely like this one. He had some light cav. I didn't like copy paste the build, but it was an interesting build. He had focused on Paladins, Royal Hippogriffs for his cavalry, and then for his main sort of damage dealing and main force, it was really just mostly infantry. And I wanted to give it a shot against Vampire Coast. So for my Lord, Fey Enchantress, well, there's not much to be said there. I did bring her on Silveron, of course, giving her some good mobility, which I think is important. She does, of course, have Earthblood as well as Regrowth, and then, of course, Life Bloom, good old Chalice of Potions, Favor of the Fae, and Arcane Conduit, and, of course, the usual Mist of the Lady. So she's all in all very well-rounded, very tanky against missiles, or relatively tanky against missiles, very tanky against magic missiles. And she can just apply the heals that I need for the rest of my force. Now, for the front line, well, it's Battle Pilgrims, which is not something you see every day. I do think Battle Pilgrims are currently a little overpriced. I think they should be more in the 550 range. for their cost. And their stats are pretty comparable to Empire Swordsmen. They're almost a copy-paste Empire Swordsmen with slightly better weapon strength and melee attack when Frenzy is up, and much better leadership. So I think a slight drop would be nice. But regardless, we're looking to cleave through any cheap trash with these guys, as well as the Holy Wardens of Lamais and Tal here. So we've got a lot of damage in the front line, looking to slaughter zombies. And if my opponent had Sirens, we can cleave through them with Holy Wardens as well. Obviously, Depth Guard would give us trouble, but that's what the rest of this build is for. On the flanks, we do have some spearmen, just protecting against any flankers, or if my opponent starts dropping summons on my backline, we can protect them. We do have up in the sky Royal Hippogriff Knights as well as 2 Paladins, and the Paladins both kitted out. I actually had to drop one of my Peasant Bows. My Peasant Bows here are 2 Fire Arrows, 2 Pox Arrows, and then there is a single unit of normal Peasant Bows, and I actually had to downgrade them because I wanted to make enough room to get a second Charm Shield. So one of the few times I've actually downgraded something to get an item, and the Charm Shield does give you better missile parry and missile resistance, so damage resistance, which is really nice. We both got Foe Seeker, and honestly, against most of the large that the Vampire Coast can bring to the field, they are not bad. For the rest of the build, well, it's a... Well, yeah, we still saw the Peasant Bows. The Royal Hippogriffs, of course, providing a bit of AP oomph in case I really need it. If in case my opponent routes a Rotting Leviathan or Prometheans, they will do the trick. Now, for my opponent, he did decide to go not so wide. Once again, a bit of a defensive box, and I think that it's not necessarily what you want, but we will see how it performs here. Still, this is not necessarily a bad formation. He does have, for his Lord, Count Noctilus, which is a go-to. You see him all the time, but slightly better kitted out here. He does have, of course, Earthblood and Invocation of Undead and Drowned Dead. He also does have Captain Ross Moondial, which is going to let him get even more summons potentially, which is going to be really annoying. He also did bring a Moongull Haunter, perhaps looking to crowd control my knights a little better if I'd brought cavalry. He, of course, does have the Chilling Aura. He also does have Foe Seeker and Deadly Onslaught, and he causes terror, so he can be a big nuisance in the front line, especially against cheaper Brettonian troops. Bunch of zombie-powered deckhands with polearms all over the flanks. 2 units of the deck dropper handguns up in the sky, which is actually not a bad idea because you can really chip away at enemies from the skies over a long period of time. You can sort of snipe down heavy cavalry pretty effectively and pretty safely. Single unit of bats over there on the flank, perhaps looking to scout. And then 2 mortars to crush any infantry blobs. And the Black Spot, which is the Regiment of Renown handguns, who have anti-large bonus in melee. So they can hopefully take care of themselves against my knights if I try to shut them down. And it's not a unit you see all the time. Regardless, the lines are going to start closing fairly slowly. I'm actually going to throw in the fast forward here because my opponent sort of readjusts some of his flyers here. He's trying to harass my Royal Hippogriffs, and I'm kind of just pulling back, reorganizing my flyers, and looking to get an opening in there. And you can see the mortars there actually left on free fire, chipping away at the Paladins, which is really not what you want doing. I'm forced to prematurely pop my Charmed Shield, which is not what you want, but we are able to sort of squeak away without taking too much damage from the Black Spot and Count Noctilus. In the meantime, though, the infantry line is pushing forward, and really what I should have done here is played a bit more patiently, hit back, and let this engagement start developing beforehand. But definitely patience not my strong suit, so you're going to be committing a little bit here with our Paladins, looking to pressure these deck dropper handguns away, looking to pressure them away with the Hippogriffs. Like I said, not a good play. I should have just left them go. Obviously, we can catch them. They're not very quick, so they can't really catch the Paladin, or the Paladin can easily catch them. They can't really harass me forever. But here we are flying straight into the mouth of hell, being shot to death by the Black Spot. We actually land on Noctilus here, and I'm going to drop the Hippos, looking to shut down the Black Spot. Now, obviously, they don't have charge defense when they're deployed like this, but my opponent is going to be able to sort of murderize me. You can see we do drop an Earthblood, but it only hits those guys. It doesn't actually hit my Hippos. Or it actually did, okay. I thought it didn't, but it did. And now the lines are going to start meeting. So what I really should have done at this stage was wait and play patient. I should have kept my cavalry and flyers in the back here, camp in the protective bubble of the archers, and come in later, but I did not. So yeah, I'm bad. What else is to do? In the meantime, the Paladins, one of them does get terror out, the other one does take to the sky to pressure away these deck droppers, looking to pick them away or poke them away. He does immediately knock one out of the air, but obviously there are 18 of them, and with his relatively slow melee attacks, it's going to take him a while before he can kill all of them. So he's kind of working his way down the line here, trying to damage them. Not all that successfully. Meantime, the Hippos here getting surrounded by summons and trash and depth guard, and despite the effort to hit them with a regrowth, they're going to start falling apart. You can see bombardment going down there, chalice potions, but it's not going to do too much, and my Hippos have routed, losing a model in the process, so definitely a waste of just about everything. Unfortunately for my opponent, though, the frontline fight is going significantly worse. The Battle Pilgrims, despite some bad deployment on my part, are dicing through the infantry. They are wrecking those zombie pirate deckhands, and you can see the Holy Wardens here just racking up the kills. And my opponent's front line is buckling at this stage. My opponent did have a unit of Depth Guard, though, who is going to start stabilizing this point over here against the Battle Pilgrims. But in the meantime, I am starting to outmaneuver him. I'm getting the Spearmen on the flanks. Over here, the Spearmen are engaging and shutting down the zombie pirate deckhands. And unfortunately, I did not get these Spearmen moving quickly, but because of that, we are able to sort of continue that slow crawl with our archers, and you can see the black spot here starting to get whittled down. They're not the tankiest of units for sure. Unfortunately, they are shooting down my paladins. You're definitely hurting them in their fight against the deck droppers. You can see that constant barrage. This unit of Depth Guard is still sitting tight, holding the line, which perhaps a mistake. Perhaps they should have been committed at this point. But you can see the hippos are going to dive in and start doing some major hurt, going after these mortars, looking to shut them down and keep the peasants safe, because the peasant bows, of course, very important to keep them in the fight. That said, now the peasant bows are going to start unloading on the Depth Guard, and as well as some of them on the black spot, so that is very significant. And that is going to be important for us. Over here, in the meantime, one of the paladins once again routed. But this paladin's staying in there, fighting for the good fight, doing some damage. Slowly but surely winning against the deck droppers. Aerostorm, in the meantime, just whittling down the pocket here. Unfortunately, the Royal Hippogriffs are going to start suffering. Another Regirth going down on them, trying to keep them in the fight. But they are taking damage. Depth Guard are not to be trifled with, and they're doing a lot. So we're going to pull the hippos and go after the Morngull Haunter, looking to shut him down for good and stay safe. In the meantime, the Battle Pilgrims and the Spearmen collapsing up from all sides, looking to sort of encircle these Depth Guard and drain them and slowly destroy them. The mortars especially almost taken offline here, which is very, very important for me. Now, up in the skies, the Paladins once again engaging with the deck droppers. That's repeated routes. They are doing their very best here, trying to take them offline. Not really necessarily doing the very best, but they are trying, and it's taking them a while. But, you know, they're winning. These deck droppers almost offline. This unit of deck droppers almost offline, and they've kind of been stuck wasting their time with these paladins this entire game. And the paladins on Pegasus, for those of you guys who don't know, they are actually pretty cheap. They're like 1,000 a piece, just a little bit more expensive than the, well, maybe like 300 more expensive. They're not that expensive of an investment, so it's a fairly efficient anti-air squad. And definitely one that stays safer than Pegasus Knights. Unfortunately, over here, the Depth Guard is masterfully maneuvered out of the way by my opponent, which is really frustrating. But at least at this stage, my opponent is running out of troops. He does still have some chaff summons who are harassing me in the backline, but he has now lost his Haunter. And although he's able to remove the Fan Enchantress from play with the Depth Guard, she did already mortis them a good bit. And now they are coming under the withering fire of the peasant rabble, and they are definitely not going to take any prisoners. They're going to be able to mess these guys up pretty good. Up in the skies, the Paladins are wrapping up the rest of the deck droppers, and the Holy Wardens are now free to do their holy work, pushing in against my opponent, who has just summoned some Zombie Pirate Gunnery mobs. You can't see that collapse of infantry pushing in to support, and we're going to be able to start applying real pressure here. And Noctilus, obviously not a bad duelist, but he's not going to be able to win against Royal Hippos in the long run. Though he is stomping one, and he kills one of them there with his feet there, just steps on him. Poor guy. In the meantime, the Depth Guard here is starting to get overwhelmed. That the mix of withering, shooting, as well as the Holy Wardens diving in. The Holy Wardens aren't a bad unit per se, even against, especially against debilitated armor. These guys are losing obviously a lot of their armor defense. So with their dropping, with their dropping vigor, so that's good. And the Holy Wardens will be able to do some damage. You can see, unfortunately, the hunger is going off, healing them, and they're tanking through this pretty well. But that constant fire is going to start taking its toll. There's only so much you can survive. And in the meantime, Noctilus here getting swarmed. The Hippos are in the fray. Both of the Paladins are in the fray. They are smashing away at him. He's only got 75 armor, so not the tankiest of lords against just raw volleys of damage. Archers also applying their pressure. And the Fey Enchantress is somewhere in here, draining away these Zombie Pirate deckhands who have been intercepted by the spears. And that's very important because it lets me keep my archers online and firing from all angles. Now, Noctilus is still healing. He does have the hunger because he's a vampire. But we are able to sort of extricate our Royal Hippos here, not keeping him in the fight against the Depth Guard. And at the time, I don't actually think I realized some of these were Depth Guard. I thought they were all Zombie Pirate polearms. But we are able to extricate ourselves, continue pounding Count Noctilus, who is starting to fall apart. And now as they're surrounded, the spears are coming in. The Royal Hippos are going to be able to dive in and really start putting Noctilus through the grinder. And he's not going to be able to last much longer. Now he's going to try to barrage the Fey Enchantress over here, nuking her down a little bit, but she does actually outmaneuver the bolts that are coming down. It only takes, I think, one hit, and of course she has magic resist to boot. And at this point, Noctilus is going to crumble alongside his faithful Depth Guard, losing a leg. I love that animation. He just loses a leg and falls down. And that is going to be game for the Brettonians. So, fun game, a bit more of a protracted engagement. And I think this build is not bad. Now, in that game, my impatience really screwed me over. I was very aggressive, almost threw my hippogriffs and paladins away for nothing. Because I could have easily just waited. Could have gotten my archers into position, whittled my opponent down, kind of drank a cup of tea, take some time, and I would have been fine. But instead, I had to play aggressive, and it almost cost me the game. I almost threw it there. Because had I lost these units fully in the beginning, and then in late game I would have, against the Morngul Haunter and against Noctilus, especially against the Depth Guard, this infantry line would not have held up at all if I'd thrown those flyers or those heroic units away. But that said, I do think this is a good build. If you're looking to counter the Vampire Coast, I think going wide with Battle Pilgrims and Spearmen at Arms, maybe, well, whatever you want for the chaff, but with Peasant Bows and Battle Pilgrims, and then a few elite monster killers with Royal Hippogriffs and Paladins, I think is a very strong strategy, and I think it's a very good way to go. For my opponent, I don't think it's a bad build, but I do think it's perhaps a little small. It's a very compact force, but I don't actually think it's that bad of a composition. I just think that perhaps ditching one of those Depth Guard, honestly, for a few more pole arms would be a better way to go, perhaps. But otherwise, definitely not bad. And well, definitely well played. I think one of the main problems there was focus fire. I think the mortar should have been working on the peasant bows rather than the infantry blobs. The infantry blobs just weren't that important in the long run. The peasant bows were definitely going to be the MVPs of that match if they were allowed to fire, and my opponent needed to shut them down, and he did not. Otherwise, though, yeah, like I said, I think it's not a bad build. Another issue, I guess, was a little bit that he couldn't really support his deck droppers from the ground. He did have the black spot, but that's only one unit. And they did damage when I wasn't, because I kind of blew it. I kind of pushed in. But had I been patient, had I sort of let my peasant bows work on the depth of the black spot, then there would have been nothing to protect the deck droppers, and the deck droppers would have been very easy pickings for the paladins. Like Noctilus isn't going to do it with his arm cannon. So that's just my 2 cents there. Regardless, we'll play to my opponent's severity. We'll play to my prior opponent as well. Poor Vampire Coast, just not their day. And this video, but regardless, it was a lot of fun, and I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, as usual, like, subscribe, share. If you have any comments, any criticism, any questions, don't hesitate to post them, and I'll do my best to respond as soon as I can. I do thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.